the early days, conditions in and around Fort Bend County, as well as much of the rest of the state, were far from pristine. Gunfights were commonplace, and underhand, immoral conditions were widespread, but the area east of the river was especially corrupt. The early history of Sugar Land area is not grand. After the Civil War, the state began a practice of contracting out convict labor through an arrangement known as the Convict Lease Program. Sugar Land plantation owners used workers from the program almost exclusively for their labor. Landowners maintained their poor sold under conditions that were worse than those experienced by many slaves held by Texans before the Civil War. This program and other similar ones earned the area the title, the Hell on the Brazos. The plantations east of the river got worse and worse in every respect as time went on, moral, mentally, and socially, primarily because of the overwhelming financial burdens. The area's principal problem was that it was on the low bank of the river and prone to flooding, which was almost an annual event. The floods were devastating the farms, the principal occupation of the area at this time. In the early days of the 20th century, several factors came together that greatly altered the overall welfare of the Sugar Land area. First, the sugar-producing plantations of the area began considering consolidating and refining. Second, the state of Texas discontinued the convict lease program. And third, the Imperial Sugar Company was founded in 1905 by W.T. Eldridge and the Kempler family. In an effort to acquire new and better qualified laborers, the company bought in men from the Sludenburg and Flatonio area and furnished them with housing and other civil necessities, essentially turning Sugar Land into a standard company town. The third action changed the complex of the area for the better, but the old stigma remained in the minds of most of the people in West Fort Bend County. To some extent, those stigmas remain to this day. When the company was formed, Mr. G.D. Ulrich, a brother Mason, was made Mr. Eldridge's personal assistant. Far from beginning a simple administrative assistant, Ulrich was a complete trusted associate. And workers were told that anything ordered by Ulrich was to be accepted as coming from Mr. Eldridge himself. As will be seen, Brother Ulrich's role as Mr. Eldridge's right-hand man was significant in the formation of the lodge in Sugar Land. Not only did he offer a rebuttal of criticism for the 1920 petition of the new lodge, but he also offered a site for the new lodge as vice president and general manager of the Sugar Land Industries. It might be interesting here to note that Sugar Land Industries was formed as a catch-all business through which Kempner and Eldridge managed the conglomerate of large and small businesses they established in Sugar Land. No one remembers why the name of the town was compressed into one word in the corporate logo, but as the insistence of the Imperial the corporation, the name of the city is in two words, Sugar Land. In these documents, Sugar Land Industries and Imperial Sugar are often interchangeable and sometimes incorrectly. The petition of 1919 of Morton Lodge, the first petition for a new lodge at Sugar Land, was apparently rejected without much reprisal. They are mentioned by brothers G.D. Goldridge and Mayor Davis during the process of establishing the lodge. The first petition that was challenged by members of Morton Lodge resided in Sugar Land area was present to Morton Lodge in the late 1919. As Brother Boone states, to reconstruct Sugar Land Lodge at the beginning, one must consult the minutes of Morton Lodge 72. The presentation of a petition to the Mother Lodge instead of the Grand Lodge might seem to be mysterious to us today, but I'm sure that this was an attempt to get the blessings of the Mother Lodge, which the Grand Lodge would seriously consider in the decision of whether or not to grant the petition. Unfortunately, that there were some in Morton Lodge who did not think this move would be the benefit of Morton Lodge and or the Grand Lodge. The report to the committee of the 1919 petition probably would have been interesting, but the secretary didn't comment on this contents, and it's somehow mysteriously misplaced. According to Brother Boone, a letter from G.D. Ulrich to C.A. Durst concerning the promise of a lot for the building of the Masonic Lodge in Sugar Land was written immediately thereafter. It should be noted that for an 85-member lodge, a great deal of Masonic work was coming from the Sugar Land area. During World War I and shortly thereafter, there were also many new Masons from the Sugar Land area. The 1920 petition of the Morton Lodge. Brother Boone states that on 23rd June of 1920, brothers Harry Reedon and W.W. Dirks and R.B. Little Jr. presented a new petition to Morton Lodge number 72. After review by Morton Lodge number 72 committee, Brother Boone reported that on 21st September of 1920, the report to the committee of the new lodge was accepted and the committee discharged. The prospective charter of Sugar Land Lodge on 5 November of 1920 in Sugar Land, Texas. This was a meeting to discuss and appoint brothers to go to the Grand Lodge of Texas in Waco on 2nd December of 1920 in an effort to secure a charter for Sugar Land Lodge. Sugar Land Lodge number 1141 AF and AM, having been chartered on 10th of December of 1920 by the Most Worshipful Grand Lodge of Texas during its annual communications in December of 1920, officially began its work 17 January of 1921. The Imperial Sugar Company granted the lodge the use of the top floor of the warehouse rented free, located on Kempner Street between Wood Street and Main Street, due to the fact that many of the members were in fact executives and workers in the company. Hence the significance of the Sugar Land Heritage Foundation and our event being here tonight. The lodge was founded near here. Matter of fact, the field next to the water tower. Wanted to celebrate where our brothers would be meeting 100 years ago today. As the country faced the woes of the Great Depression, the membership of Sugar Land Masonic Lodge suffered as well, with many members moving into Houston to find work and opportunity. However, with the end of World War II and the return of younger men, a noticeable rise in membership took place. The urgent need for a new lodge home became apparent as the old office building at the top of which the Sugar Land Lodge was situated became a storage warehouse for salvage, and lodge members were informed that the building would be abandoned as soon as the lodge could arrange to leave it. Working diligently to raise money in the late 1960s found Sugar Land Masonic Lodge were ready to move to the land donated to them at the corner of Rolling Mills and Sugar Land, Eldridge by Sugar Land Industries. Brothers who had been assigned to the task oversaw the construction of the brick building in which we are housed today. At the stated lodge meeting on March 16th, 1970, it was reported that the cornerstone leveling would take place at 3 o'clock p.m. on Saturday, April 11th of 1970, with PGMJW Chandler presiding. Unfortunately, the busy schedule of the Grand Master Most Worshipful Hal Burnett was in another part of the state and prevented his attendance. I will now ask Right Worshipful Dr. Aaron Wayne Tazinski, past Master of Sugar Land 1141, year 2016 and 2017, and Worshipful Master of Morton Lodge number 72 to come up and speak. Thank you all.
Thank you, Worshipful Master. How are y'all doing this evening? We certainly appreciate you being here, especially in the midst of a worldwide pandemic. The Grand Master, and I'll talk about the Most Worshipful Grand Master here in a little while when we present the 100-year certificate. But your attendance here this evening is very much appreciated. So you heard the Worshipful Master give you a brief history of Sugar Land Masonic Lodge, and I'm going to take it a little bit more globally and discuss the influence of Freemasonry on both Sugar Land, the state of Texas, and the United States in general. Masonry has had a major influence in the birth of the United States of America and both the Republic and state of Texas. Many of you in this room grew up in a society where famous Freemasons were prominent in everyday life and not just in history books. Presidents, actors, astronauts, musicians, politicians, military heroes, and so many more exhibited exemplary behavior and lived with certain character traits that was also influenced many generations. Men such as George Washington, Amadeus Mozart, Will Rogers, Gene Autry, Buzz Aldrin, Henry Ford, George MacArthur, Ernest Borgnine, Benjamin Franklin, and my personal favorite, John Wayne. What y'all do know what I'm saying? The Masonic fraternity brought to the United States, or the American colonies in the mid-1800s, or in the mid-18th century, was well established in all of the United States by 1820. The first Americans to migrate to Texas in the 1820s were a number of Masons, including Stephen F. Austin. Austin attempted to organize a Masonic Lodge in 1828 when he and 6 other Masons met at San Felipe and petitioned the Grand York Lodge of Mexico for charter dispensation. The dispensation evidently reached Mexico as a height of quarrel between the Yorkinos and the Esquisses, which were the adherents of the Scottish Rite at that time, and that petition disappeared. A more successful effort occurred in the spring of 1835 when Dr. Anthony Jones and 5 others, who fearing the Mexican reprisals, met secretly under the Masonic oath in Brazoria and petitioned the Grand Lodge of Louisiana for the charter. The Grand Master of that state, John Henry Holland, issued that dispensation, and Holland Lodge number 36 met for the first time on 27 December 1835, with Jones presiding as the worshipful master. Holland Lodge struggled for several months until it was overwhelmed during the Texas Revolution by the Mexican General Jose Guerrero, who destroyed all of the lodge's records and their equipment. Because of the scattering of the membership, and brethren decided not to reopen the Lodge of Brazoria, and instead opened it in Houston in 1837. The Grand Lodge of Louisiana issued 2 additional charters to Texas lodges during the time, which is Milam number 40 and Nacogdoches McFarland number 41 in San Augustine. In December of 1837, delegates of these 3 lodges convened in Houston to organize the Grand Lodge of the Republic of Texas. President Sam Houston presided over this meeting, which resulted in the election of Anson Jones as the first Grand Master. Between 1835 and 1845, the Texas Grand Lodge issued charters to 21 more lodges, and membership increased from 73 to 357. In addition, there were probably some 1,110 Masons from other jurisdictions living in Texas at that time. Although only constituting 1.5% of the population at the time, Masons filled some 80% of the Republic's higher offices. All of the presidents of the Republic, the vice presidents, the Secretary of State were all Masons. And after annexation in the United States, Masons continued prominent in the state government between 1846 and 1861. 5 of the 6 governors were members of the fraternity. And Mason continued to prosper. By 1860, there were 226 active lodges in Texas with 9,000 members. The Civil War saw between 1/3 and 1/2 of the membership in military service. During the war, the Grand Lodge issued dispensations to 32 traveling military lodges established by Army units. Meager records, however, make it impossible to determine exactly how many lodges were actually formed during that time. The Grand Lodge experienced several financial difficulties. We've heard that before. During these years, many of the lodges were unable to pay their annual assessments, and in 1861, the Grand Treasurer was directed to sell all of the United States government bonds and invest the money in Confederate bonds. The Grand Lodge was rendered penniless by the defeat of the Confederacy, and Reconstruction brought continued financial problems to lodges sought by the remission of their annual dues. Although the Grand Lodge frequently complied, it was canceled over 50 charters between 1865 and 1880 due to financial hardship. Prosperity gradually returned, and by 1878, the Grand Lodge was solvent. Membership had reached 17,000. This trend continued for many years, except for brief downturns. After most wars, Masonic membership skyrocketed and saw a dramatic increase after World War I, when membership climbed from 94,000 in 1920 to 134,000 in 1929. Of course, the Great Depression brought equally dramatic decline to a low of 95,000 in 1937. A number of lodges lost their temples, constructed during the prosperous 1920s, and their membership declined as much as 60%. The waning of the Depression and the onset of World War II produced the reinstatement of many former members, and after 1945, thousands joined the lodge, and post-membership reached 245,000 in 1961. The magnificent new Grand Lodge Temple was constructed in Waco in 1949 and went in service in 1952. This building was supposedly patterned after King Solomon's biblical temple, which contains 135,000 square feet and includes a library and museum, and memorabilia open to the public. I believe we have a library and museum board present with us. Brother Leopold, where is he at? The charitable and benevolent activities in Freemasonry in Texas fall under two categories. Before 1900, most of the money and effort was directed to education, especially in those years before the establishment of a viable public school system. In fact, Irbu B. Lamar, who is considered the father of education in Texas, was influential here in the county of Fort Bend, and his grave is 7 miles from this very spot. The Grand Lodge established an education fund in 1847 and appointed a superintendent of education the following year. Between 1850 and 1873, the legislature also established more than 100 unchartered schools. And in addition, the early public school systems initially met in lodge buildings. In the 20th century, Texas Masons broadened the scope of their philanthropic efforts. These were limited to Masonic family and the Masonic Home and School in Fort Worth, the home for the aged Masons in Arlington, and the Scottish Rite Dormitory for women at the University of Texas at Austin. Among the Masonic charities serving the public are the Texas Scottish Rite Hospital for crippled children in Dallas and the Shriners Burn Institute in Galveston. Today, the Masons in the United States donate more than $2 million to charity each day. Since the early 1960s, Texas Masonry, like other fraternal organizations, has faced serious membership decline. From 1961 at a high of 245,000 each year, that membership has dropped to date. As of 4 o'clock this afternoon, there are only 74,036 Master Masons in Texas working in 708 lodges. The development of the city of Sugar Land was influenced by Masons well before the birth of Sugar Land Lodge. As you heard the worshipful master give you some information on that. Masons who worked here on the sugar plantations and in the factory, as well as those who lived in the community, made their pilgrimage to attend Morton Lodge number 72, 7 miles away, and even Rosenberg Lodge 881, 13 miles from here, as there was no lodge in Sugar Land. After years of traveling, many of the men did not want to travel by foot, horse, wagon, or automobile afterward, and then again after lodge. The Masons of Sugar Land obtained approval from both Morton Lodge and Rosenberg Lodge in accordance to Grand Lodge law to form their lodge of their own, and as you heard, Sugar Land was started on 10 December 1920. Over time, some legendary men in Fort Bend County and the town of Sugar Land have been members of this lodge. These men include J.R. Pearl, I.H. Kempner, which if you look on that wall back in the back in 1905, and as you heard the worshipful master, I.H. Kempner was a very important person here at Sugar Land. W.K. Helmkamp, W.L.A. Wheeler, E.O. Wood, Lawrence E. Elkins, Brayden Olive, whose son is here with us. Where is he? See? Ernest Taylor and Don Smithers, Councilman Don Smithers. Where is Don Smithers? Thank you, sir. The influence of Sugar Land was in the financial development, economic success, public school district administration, police chief, city council members, state and district and county court judges, and the county attorney. Some of their sons and grandsons are still members of this lodge or still live in the city of Sugar Land. I am proud to be the 96th past master of Sugar Land Lodge, and it was my pleasure to have set these items in motion for Worshipful Master Swindon to be the 100th Worshipful Master of Sugar Land Lodge, as I chose him for Junior Deacon in 2016, and the natural progression of Worshipful Master 4 years later. So, I want to thank the citizens of Sugar Land for being our partner in the community and for supporting our philanthropic endeavors and our Masonic goals of faith, hope, and charity. Additionally, the Lodge wants to thank the Grand Lodge officers in attendance and those Masons who have traveled from afar to celebrate this auspicious and historic occasion. God bless you all. Thank you.
1983.
When they called me, I'm afraid they thought I was here from 1920. But this lodge has had a lot of the names that he listed, and there's some that he left out. Buddy Blair, who was a longtime lodge secretary, was also an early council member in the state of Sugar Land for many years. And I'm a relative newcomer to the lodge. I didn't join until 1975. So a lot of the history that I missed out on, but there's been quite a list of notable people, like he said, through the city, through the county, and some of them have gone on to the state offices. And I guess the highlight of my years as worshipful master in 1982 and 83 was when we built the dining room. Because up until that time, we had just the little lodge building itself, and the entryway where you come in now, we had a meal, we crammed in there. And you can well imagine how crowded that was, and so it was decided, okay, we're going to expand, we're going to build an additional for a dining room. And we had Walter Plum, who was an engineer, and he was very helpful in coming up with drawings, and of course Buddy Blair and some of the others. And so we poured a slab, and I remember it was a cold day, and a bunch of these dummies out there trying to put up this building. We got the steel framework pretty well put up, but we didn't have it all put up. And here we're out there on wondering, well, how are we going to get this framework for the roof? Lanny Sims had access to a front end loader, and he went and got it and brought it down there. And so that's how we got the main roof part up on that building. It's a wonder that it didn't fall down. It's a wonder we didn't kill ourselves, but we got it done. And that was, like I said, that was the highlight of my year as worshipful master. And as the years have gone on, we've really appreciated that dining area. Thank you.
Thank you, past masters.
Smithers. I now ask Brother Senior Warden Samuel Larby to come on up and give a speech on Freemasonry and education.
Let me get undressed there for a second. So my name is Stanley Larby. I'm the Senior Warden of Sugar Land Lodge, and I'm here tonight to tell you a bit about Masonry and education. The Masonic fraternity has long supported public schools. As Dr. Tazinski said, in the early days, many lodges were two-story buildings, and the lodge met on the second floor while encouraging local churches and schools to meet on the first floor. Many lodges started public schools in their lodge buildings and paid the teachers' salaries. Since those early days, many Masons have gone on to serve the community in an educational capacity. One example from Sugar Land Lodge is Past Master Lawrence D. Elkins, whose educational career culminated as superintendent of Fort Bend ISD, and whose name you may know from the high school bearing his name, located a few miles from here. He's far from the only example, however. In my 7 years as a Mason, I've known history teachers, music teachers, and science teachers. In fact, there are at least 3 members of our lodge here tonight whose income relies on educating the children of our community: Brothers Byrne, High Note, and Household.
They do not have buildings named after them, yet. But I'm sure their students, at least the smart ones, would tell them they deserve that honor. Teachers are oftentimes the unsung heroes of our lives, yet we certainly remember those who made an impact upon us. I've had several, but if I had to choose one tonight, I'd pick Miss Anderson, my pre-calculus teacher in 11th grade at Dulles High School, in whose class mathematics finally clicked for me, and who also gave me one of my first positive experiences of going up to the board and explaining something in public. Although I don't know if Mrs. Anderson ever won this award, teachers like her who have gone above and beyond their duties are recognized by their schools and their districts as Teachers of the Year. On the other side of the classroom are the students, the future builders of our community and indeed of the world. Each year, thousands of students in our community graduate from high school and go on to better themselves in the world around them. They may go to college, trade school, start immediately in the workforce, or contribute in some way to their community. This tradition is as old as Texas Masonry itself. In light of these, in 1988, under the leadership of Grandmaster Graham Childress, the Lamar Award of Excellence was established to be awarded to students and educators in recognition of outstanding personal achievement in academics, citizenship, community service, or sports. Every year, we at Land Masonic Lodge confer this award to those esteemed teachers and students and provide scholarships and honoraria to go along with it. Since I've been here, we've committed to giving at least $8,000 annually to these exemplars of our community, and this tradition began well before I became a Mason. Let me describe a brief history of the namesake of this award, quoting and paraphrasing liberally from the publication from the Grand Lodge of Texas. Mirabeau B. Lamar, a Mason, became the President of the Republic of Texas in 1838 and distinguished himself as the father of Texas education with his support of a public school system. In his first address to Congress, he described the need for such a system in Texas when he declared, "If we desire to establish a Republican government upon broad and permanent basis, it will become our duty to adopt a comprehensive and well-regulated system of mental and moral culture." He proposed setting aside public lands for the creation of a permanent endowment to support public education. His educational views met with the approval of Congress, and they set aside over 13,000 acres of land in each county to support primary schools, and over 220,000 acres to support 2 colleges, which became Texas A&M and the University of Texas. Later, Congress set aside an additional 4,400 acres for the support of county schools and made provisions for the certification of teachers. Many of these legislators were Masons. While these acts were important in the establishment of public education in Texas, the lasting impact was in the creation of a permanent endowment for the support of public education that lives to this day. Furthermore, Texas was the first state to give public aid to education. In 1854, the state legislature established 2 funds to finance the education of the youth of Texas. The old school lands of Texas continue to provide revenue to the permanent endowment and support common education in Texas and supplement the property taxes dedicated to school systems. That is all to illustrate how Masonry and Texas education have a close kinship with each other. But perhaps just as importantly as our direct impact on the community, we might look inward and find an indirect impact. Freemasonry's purpose is not tied directly with public education or even with charity in the broader sense, even if our tenets do include charity in the biblical sense. Although the fraternity awards medals and scholarships and honoraria to students and teachers in public education, we also have an internal, I'm tempted to say circumscribed, focus. The way we describe that purpose is that we take a good man and make him better. We do that through education, through contemplation, and through inculcating the knowledge from our members' holy books. We do it through the examination of symbolism, and to be sure, through studying the liberal arts and sciences. Through this instruction, Land Lodge has made teachers and police officers, computer scientists and physicists, accountants and investors, and executives and engineers and lawyers and bureaucrats and elected officials, indeed men from all walks of life, better men. Our relationship with education is not constrained to the esoteric knowledge that aids in our spiritual, moral, and intellectual growth, however. In my own Masonic experience, I've gone from being petrified of speaking in public to presenting this talk tonight. When I first joined, I had trouble introducing myself to a stranger and holding a conversation with them. Now I do that with regularity. Education is near and dear to the heart of every Texas Mason, but it has a higher purpose than merely adorning the mind. It is central to good citizenship. As Eleanor Roosevelt, who herself was not a Mason, said, it is not only in the course of bearing directly on history and government that citizenship can be taught. The child taking Latin and mathematics is also learning invaluable lessons in citizenship. The power of concentration and accuracy which these studies develop will later mean a man or a woman able to understand and analyze a difficult situation. The zealous study of the liberal arts and sciences is recommended to all Masons for these reasons. It produces good minds and good citizens. We admire this value so much that we established the ways and funded the means of encouraging and rewarding it outside the privacy of our lodge rooms. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Senior Ward. One other side note, my wife is also a teacher, so it means a lot to me too. So, we'll now transition to Brother Instructor, District Instructor Cody Cockroft, Past Master of Morton Lodge number 72, and Worshipful Master of Rosenberg Masonic Lodge number 881 for a special presentation.
Ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate having this opportunity to speak on behalf of Morton Lodge number 72 and Rosenberg Lodge number 881. Worship Master Swinney, we appreciate that very much so. And I'm sure if you're not a Mason, you might be tired of hearing all this Masonic jargon. And I'm not going to speak as long as the guy who used to be afraid to speak in public. We as Masons, and we as Masons in Fort Bend County, and you as citizens of Fort Bend County need to appreciate the fact that the history of Texas starts in Fort Bend County. In fact, the oldest Masonic monument west of the Mississippi River within the great state of Texas resides in the Morton Cemetery in the city of Richmond. And it was dated in 1824, 12 years prior to the Republic of Texas. And that's something we should all be proud of. But we're not necessarily here to talk about the city of Richmond or Morton Lodge number 72. We're here to talk about Sugar Land Lodge number 1141. The story of Sugar Land Lodge number 1141 is a story of resiliency. The brethren here assembled with me are representatives of resiliency in our partnership with Sugar Land Lodge number 1141. If you think back to the charter of Sugar Land 1141, you have to predate that to World War I and the start of World War I. Sugar Land Lodge was going to Richmond for fraternity. It was an 8-mile stretch of road. A bond had not been passed to pave. So back in the old days, Masons met when there was a full moon. They had to meet when there was a full moon because otherwise they wouldn't be able to see. And most of the time that's okay, unless you hear about all the floods of the Brazos River. And an 8-mile track, either by horse, because there wasn't many POVs, or by train, if there was a flood, you might have to stay the night in the city of Richmond just to go to lodge. In about 1919, there was 85 members at Morton Lodge number 72. Most of the time, there was only about 8 members showing up to lodge. 9 months out of a 12-month year in 1919 was because people from Sugar Land could not get to Richmond because of the floods and the washed out of the road. What that tells you is that Morton Lodge number 72 was in dire straits, and the good men of Sugar Land quite likely kept it afloat. And that brings us to this presentation. Sugar Land Lodge applied to the Mother Lodge, Morton Lodge number 72, for special dispensation because if they accepted it, more than likely the Grand Lodge of Texas would accept it. More than 4 or 5 times, the men of Morton Lodge number 72 declined that. But what's important to understand is that there appeared to be one man that was against it. And in fact, Morton Lodge number 72 in 1919 was considered a one-man lodge. That's written history. One-man lodge. One man that had the voice, and everybody else didn't do anything about it. That's not the way it's supposed to be. It took a time for Morton Lodge number 72 to be the men that God created them to be, and actually start demitting from Morton Lodge number 72 to get a greater number of men associated with the special dispensation to have a charter for Sugar Land Lodge number 1141. And that's what happened. And people thought it was going to go afoul. So they go to Grand Lodge in Waco, Texas. And it was a back and forth thing. And it took the men of Morton Lodge number 72 to stand before the Grand Master and all the Grand Trustees and tell the Grand Master that we at Morton Lodge number 72 made a promise to these men 4 years ago to get a charter, and my God, these boys deserve a charter, and the rest is history. Word from Master Sweeney, in your presentation, you made a reference to something mysteriously disappearing. Our presentation to you is in 2 parts. 1, we believe that we have found that mysterious document. And that mysterious document is held by Rob Worshel Aaron's Institute. And if you read that, and I'm going to fall well short of reading that this evening, you're going to find that this document quite likely dated between 1916 and 1918, which is quite likely the first petition to Morton Lodge number 72, because the worshipful master in 1920 happened to be who was proposed to be the junior warden at this document, though it's not dated. The name of the lodge at that time was not going to be Sugar Land Lodge number 1141, rather Imperial Lodge number 1141. This is history. This history deserves to be on the wall of Sugar Land 1141. And worshipful Master Sweeney, First Lady Sweeney, if you would please arise. And on behalf of Morton Lodge number 72, we present you this.
So as the master of Morton Lodge, I'd like to give you the document that past Master Concroft said this is that original petition.
Wow.
So, the document is not missing anymore. We have searched the various apartments and we have found the paperwork. So don't run off. There's more.
Well, wait.
It's not ShamWow.
And lastly, we created a plaque that we would ask that you would put above this plaque. And the plaque reads as follows: Legacy, past, present, and future. May this historical document represent a testament of the 100-year partnership between Morton Lodge number 72 and Sugar Land Lodge number 1141, and our common aspiration for the advancement of Freemasonry in Fort Bend County and the great state of Texas. A gift from Morton Lodge number 72. ancient-free, and accepted Masons.
It's a good thing that we found that. Now we don't have to, we can remove that from the history and say it's no longer mysteriously known. Thank you. I will now like to lead this to our Honorable Mayor Joe Zimmerman of the City of Sugar Land to give a presentation.
Good evening. On behalf of the City Council of the City of Sugar Land and the great citizens of Sugar Land, I want to thank you for inviting me to be part of this occasion. Let me recognize a few people. Evan Sweeney, Worshipful Master of Sugar Land Masonic Lodge 1141. Dr. Aaron Kaczynski, Right Worshipful District Deputy at Large. Keith Borscht, Right Worshipful District Deputy of Masonic District 108. And Paul Underwood, Most Worshipful Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Texas. When you look at Sugar Land, we just heard from some of the Grand Masters a discussion about a history of Freemasonry, not only across the world, but here in Texas, and indeed here in Richmond, Rosenberg, and Sugar Land. What makes Sugar Land different is this. What makes us different is that we have men and women who volunteer their time to make our community better. That's truly what makes us a better community, a better county, and I believe a better state. Now, if you'll bear with me, let me read this. This is a proclamation from the Office of the Mayor. Sugar Land Masonic Lodge number 1141, Centennial Celebration. That's pretty important. Centennial Celebration. Sugar Land was only created in 1959. So the lodge has actually been around much longer, almost double the amount of time that Sugar Land's been around. December the 10th of 2020. Whereas the Sugar Land Masonic Lodge number 1141 has approximately 180 members and is recognized as one of the fastest growing lodges within the greater Houston area, with a commonality from all walks of life, backgrounds, and religions, sharing a desire to better themselves and the community. And whereas in 1920, Harry Redan, W.W. Dirks, and R.B. Little Jr., executives of the Imperial Sugar Company, submitted a charter request to the Most Worshipful Grand Lodge of Texas. Sugar Land Masonic Lodge 1141 was granted charter on December 10, 1920. And whereas Sugar Land Masonic Lodge number 1141 utilized the top floor of the Imperial Sugar Factory until 1970, when they moved their current location at 421 Eldridge. And whereas on November the 14th of 2020, the Sugar Land Heritage Foundation will host a public celebration of this important moment in the Lodge's history. And whereas the Lodge has been a pillar in our community for 100 years in various venues. They provide scholarships to Fort Bend ISD, Stafford MISD, and Ailey ISD high school seniors, and contribute their time and funds to various charitable events in the community. And it's signed by my hand on this in this day. I want to present this now to the Grand Master. Okay. The Worshipful Master. And congratulate you and your members for the impact that you guys have had on the Sugar Land community.
Corporal Mayor. Appreciate it. Now I'm going to ask Right Worshipful Aaron Wayne to come back up again to give a presentation on the Grand Lodge of Texas 100-year certificate.
Now I have to change hats, and I'm not now the master of Morton Lodge or a past master of Sugarland Lodge, but I am here along with Right Worshipful Keith Forrest and Right Worshipful Maynard Fernandez to represent the Most Worshipful Grand Master of the Masons of Texas, Paul Dennis Underwood, who is unfortunately self-quarantining due to a possible COVID exposure. So unfortunately, he and other Grand Lodge officers were not able to attend because of this. We're not breaking new ground here with this. We're well into this pandemic that really started affecting Texas Masonry on the 17th of March of this year, and it continues to have a negative impact. So the ability for us to present this, and I have strict instructions from the Grand Master to pass along his very deep regret for not being able to be here and celebrate this with you and with Sugarland Lodge. Those of you that know him very well, he's a very emotional individual when it comes to that. And so we're here to present the 100 or the Centennial Award from the Grand Lodge of Texas. And I'm going to read this because it took you 100 years to get it. Okay? So it says, to all enlightened, ancient, free, and accepted Masons throughout the world, greetings. Sugarland Lodge number 1141, AF and AM, having completed 100 years of continued and active existence as a regular lodge under the jurisdiction of the Grand Lodge of Texas, is granted this certificate evidencing that its long and illustrious devotion of the cause and virtue to the cause of universal benevolence and the imperishable principles of Freemasonry. Said lodge, during the course of its existence, has promoted the general good of society, cultivated the social virtues, propagated the knowledge of art, and has made significant, valuable contributions to the moral, ethic, intellectual, and civil advancement of the community, the state of Texas, and the United States. May this lodge long enjoy every satisfaction and delight which disinterested friendship can afford, and may the tenets of our profession as Freemasons be transmitted through this lodge, pure and unimpaired, from generation to generation, to the end of the glorious heritage may be transmitted to the remote posterity. In testimony whereof I have hereunto affixed my official signature, and have caused the seal of the Most Worshipful Grand Lodge of Texas to be impressed thereon. It's actually dated 10 December 2020 AL 6020, which is the anniversary of Sugarland Lodge. So, Worshipful Master Sweeney, you will please come up here and accept this award on behalf of Most Worshipful Paul Dennis Underwood. I would like to present to you Sugarland Centennial Certificate. It's already framed. Congratulations.
Thank you. We had one more section, but we didn't, with Grandmaster not being here, we won't go into that presentation. I just want to say again, on behalf of Sugarland Masonic Lodge 1141, it's been a great honor to serve as Worshipful Master this year. It's a great honor to serve as a Mason. It's a great honor to be here with all of you tonight. We do have a few minutes still to have this venue. If you would like, you can walk around, and the Sugarland Heritage Foundation has a bit more history of Sugarland itself. So if you want to take a gander at some of that stuff, go ahead. Otherwise, I want to say thank you again for being here tonight. Thank you for coming far. I appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. Thank y'all.